And this is the area that I would encourage you, whether you're a coach or you're a player, to simply start to look at who you are when you're at your best and make it part of your identity. This is a brilliant example in sport of how Ian McGeechan pulled the Lions squad together during last year's Ashes, the tour that he went on, the Lions tour, out to South Africa. When he got the 40 players into the dressing room with him, there were some players that were bringing perceived grudges from one of their own four nations. And he said there were some people in the room that actively disliked each other. What McGeechan did was get the squad together and say, how do we create a great team in the next 6 weeks? Well, the answer is he didn't know. But he reminded his players that they did. And he asked them, he used a self-consistency theory and asked them to tell me the behaviours that great teams that they have been part of have demonstrated before. And the behaviours came back and people said, we've got a common goal, we're passionate, we're enthusiastic. And one of the common themes that kept coming back was players would say, trust was an important element. McGeechan then asked them, he said, if we had to give it a score from 0 to 10, 10 being most important, what value would you place on trust in a great performing team? And the majority of his players came back and said it was undoubtedly a 10. McGeechan then set them an exercise where he said, I'm now going to give you 2 minutes to have a look around the room and identify the one player in this room that you trust less than anybody else. He then said to them, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to go up to that individual, to look them in the eye and identify them as the person. How are you going to build the boundaries and the bridges of trust between you over the next 6 weeks? Not surprisingly, none of the players wanted to do it initially. And the point that McGeechan said was that that's fine, but don't rate yourself as 10 out of 10. Because his job wasn't to tell them what to do. His job was simply to hold a mirror up to them and challenge them to the behaviours that they wanted to be consistent and congruent to. And this is one of the themes that you'll find come back with elite performers, whether it's in business, sport, education, it doesn't matter. They're entirely consistent and congruent to the image they hold of themselves. Now I want to show you a short video clip that shows you how the power of focus on these kind of behaviours can deliver some pretty impressive results. Have a look at this and you'll see what I mean.
In this line of work, you need strength as well as instincts. Put it right here. Gotcha. Check this out. Ready? Go! That's why you picked me. Your move.
Hey, Chris! One more time!
They've been asking me to do this all day. Check me out. One more time. Come on. That's 3 reasons to pick me. Your move.
It's really only 2:59. They hate it when I do this. Check it out. It's time to pick me. It's your move.
In this league, if there's a hole, no matter how small, you got to be able to get through it. Check this out. Yeah. In your league, you better pick me. Your move.
So fight option is probably the most public example, though, of what you saw the England team do this summer. When you got them, I often see it through the format of scapegoating, where they blame Robert Green for throwing the ball in. They blame Capello for only telling in the team 2 hours before kick-off. Rooney walks off the pitch and blame the fans. They blame the football that they said it was alien to what they played with before. They blame the country. They blame the altitude. They blamed everybody but themselves. And you take emotional intelligence out of any team, you will always find that the performance will start to spiral in a horrible circle downwards. If you want an illustration, let's watch a video of how not to deliver that kind of team talk at half-time.
Half-time in La Bombonera Stadium, and England trail Mexico by 2 goals to 0.
Have you heard what the crowd is shouting? Bastards and bastards and bastards! They shouldn't be shouting at me! They should be shouting at you! And do you know why? Because it's in half-time and we're 2-0 down to the Mexico! seconds. Wrong with it. Get your fingers out. Where's your bottle gun? And come and pay attention when I'm talking to you. If you don't want to wear the shit off, there's thousands of kids out there who die. Put that shit on. Back on the field. Show what you can do. Or off home on the plane. You got that?
England lose 4-0.
Well, to start this second stage, I'd like to ask you the second of our two poll questions, which is, as a coach, which type of player would you prefer to work with? And I'm giving you three options below. Which leads us on to the next one of our slides, which is also this whole idea around attitude, and you'll see where the poll question links to it later. Attitude is one of those difficult words to almost articulate. What does it mean? If you were to ask people what attitude means, people find it a really difficult task to almost articulate it. My favourite definition is what the Royal Marines use. The Royal Marines describe attitude as quite simply, how do you respond to facts? How do you respond to facts? So when people say to you, the weather's bad, or, my teammates aren't motivated, or I'm not playing in the team, the Marines would ask you, how do you respond to those facts? And their training programme that they recruit people through is 16 weeks long, and it's called Dislocated Expectations, which is quite simply where they keep changing the rules of the game and watching how do you respond to those facts. And they reckon after 16 weeks you can divide teams up into two, or individuals up into two camps. They say you're the sort of person that takes accountability. Whatever facts are thrown at you, you take accountability for it, and you think about what you can do, how you can improve it, what your role in that is. The Marines would describe you in that context as being an energizer, the sort of leader that gives a buzz, a creativity, a dynamism to any team that you join. Alternatively, if you spend most of your time complaining and moaning and bitching and whining about how unfair life is or who's not pulling the weight, the Marines would describe you there as being an energy sapper, the sort of person that just drains the lifeblood out of an organisation. Now, if you were being honest when you think about this, which camp would you put yourself in? Would you describe yourself as the sort of person that when you walk into the dressing room lights up around you? Or would you see yourself as being more the sort of person that when you walk out of the dressing room lights up after you? Because your answer to that question, I think, is probably fundamental to predicting just how well you're going to perform for the rest of this season and next. And the reason I say that is because I've spent time with the Royal Marines and taking sports teams down there and made the mistake of choosing to ignore their advice. I remember being part of one team where we took them down to spend time with the Marines, and they came back to us. We took a squad of 50 players down there, and they came back and presented us with a list of 7 names. When we asked the commanding officer, what do those names mean? He said to us, if we had to go to war with the men you've just provided us with, before we met the enemy, we'd shoot those 7 players ourselves. Now, unfortunately for us, 4 of them were our best players. But what the Marines were telling us is, I don't care how technically good they are, their attitude is poor. Their attitude is somebody that is like a cancer to a team. So how do you resolve it? How do you change it? Well, the answer I would say to you is, when you're thinking about it, answer this simple question. And I often say this when I go into schools and talk to teaching staff. I'll say, I think the most important factor in terms of how you can influence your own attitude is to simply have a look at where you spend most of your time. Because if you sit with groups of energy sappers, people that are constantly moaning, whining and complaining, I think pretty soon you'll start to become one. If you think back to your 4 emotional needs, one of our needs is to belong. And if you're sat with people that are energy sappers, you will have an instinctive herding instinct to go and belong with them. Alternatively, if you look for the players that are passionate, the ones that are really committed and love doing it, hang around with them and you'll soon start to see that kind of attitude is contagious. One of the phrases the Marines used to use to us was, they said that if you hang around with skunks for long enough, you'll soon start to smell. And it's a question that I think is worth pondering when you think about, where do you spend most of your time?
We've had a question from Jim, who's in the United States, who asks, should kids' teams have a sports psychologist?
Absolutely. I mean, I appreciate that logistics mean that that's not always possible, but I certainly think the coaches should be open to that kind of feedback and advice. Because there's a guy that I'd encourage you to think about, especially if you're watching in the United States, a guy called Jim Thompson that runs the Youth Sports Alliance, and he encourages coaches to actually make sport fun for kids. Because too often we get caught up in worrying about whether we win or lose. And he runs a whole series of workshops which are designed to encourage coaches of young people that are playing sport to get them to remember the passion and the enjoyment behind it. And it's great to have a sports psychologist working with you, but if you can't, getting access to webcasts like this or the books or the resources that are available just to help coach yourself in some of these simple steps.
John in Belfast is with us today. Hello, John. He asks, he has a player with all the right qualities to be a great footballer, but he often loses it and gets involved in conflict. How can John manage that situation?
Well, again, that's one of those ideas that we often get caught up in. I teach this to boxers. This is one of the techniques I work with boxers about, where we often talk to them, the fight doesn't start the evening you step between those ropes into the ring. The fight really starts for you in terms of your preparation for when you meet your opponent for the first time. Because if you've ever seen them going nose to nose at press conferences, if you ever get close enough to listen, what they're talking to each other about can often be really vile, insulting language. And the reason they're doing it is they're looking to simply start to gain an advantage over the other. Because if you bombard somebody with a stream of negative words or insults, what you're hoping they'll do is they'll lose control over their behaviour. You lose control over your behaviour and you react to somebody suggesting that you don't have the stamina or your punch isn't big enough. Chances are your game plan goes out of the window and you do your best to simply respond to what they've said. You throw your game plan out of the window, chances are you'll have less success. When you have less success and you find yourself picking yourself up off the canvas, it starts to manifest itself as a belief that maybe you don't have the punch or maybe you are wild and reckless, and you get into that horrible pessimism cycle. And in terms of, for the guy in Belfast, in terms of the one that keeps getting dragged into conflict, I'd think about where we can make an easily identifiable change in terms of getting dragged into that pessimism cycle, which is just identifying that the words that are being used are simply designed to put him off performing at his very best, and just recognise that and keep control over his game plan and what he's intending to do. See it as a compliment more than anything.